It's December 16th, 2014, and I quickly wanted to add to something I already said about the Bechtolds. When I was being led to the bed at nighttime, and then sometimes sedated, other times electrocuted there, I was also getting raped while I was in the bed. So it wasn't just they had me forced to respond to giving them blowjobs while seated in a chair in George and Janet Bechtold's bedroom, and then they also were raping me while I was lying down on a bed that they led me to in their guest room or their kids' room, and the kids weren't there. And they had different men going in. Many times it was George Bechtold. Other times it was other men that they just invited into their house to do this to me. And then after they had a number of government men, and George repeatedly raped me while I was lying down in this bed at their house, and intimidate me and tell me, they'd basically lie on top of me, rub their bodies against me, force me down not to move until they make me do something with my hand to their penises, or they would do something and ejaculate all over. And they would use the same kinds of threats of, I had to respond and not try to fight it, or else I was getting, George Bechtold had some kind of a black belt degree in a martial arts field, and he beat me up if I tried to resist. And then a couple of other guys also beat me, or they punched me in the stomach, and they threatened with knives and that kind of thing. So then after a very large number of individuals, of men, also tried raping me and used all their fright triggers against me to accept being raped. After they had all done a whole bunch of things to me, they got nervous, and then to make sure that they felt they were protected, they made a Bob Jr., I thought was my dad, and I don't know which Bob Jr. it was, because there are twins and triplets of them, but they made him go into the room and lie on top of me and do this whole kind of thing just that they had all done. And then they would rub my back and then sometimes ejaculate on my back. So basically, and they didn't have a Bob Jr. do that to me at night, like near the bed or anything, until a large number of government people had done that to me. And they always made sure that I was wearing a flannel nightgown or some kind of a nightgown. Typically it couldn't be pajamas, although a couple times it was, but usually it wasn't. But sometimes it was pajama tops and bottoms that I wore. And that's what they were doing to me. And they had, I would say, again, around, like 30, 40 men doing that to me. And a couple of them, one that showed up was possibly, I'm not 100% sure, But although I know George Bechtold was involved, I think possibly George Bush showed up there and was one of the men who did that while I was in their bed at their house lying down. And I just remember him for some reason being there. And if that's true, at the time, I believe his dad was the director of the CIA. And that's pretty much what I remember, is that George Bush did show up there. And I'd seen from other locations that he was there as well. And James Comey also knew the Bechtolds because he had, I don't remember as much with him specifically with me, although it's possible he was another one of the men who went into the bedroom at night to do that to me. But what I do remember is that he was one of the men that a Dixie that went into the room where Dixie was, where I believe Dixie was getting raped. One of the Dixies was at the Bechtolds' house, at George and Janet Bechtolds' house. James Comey, as we all know, is currently director of the entire headquarters of the FBI. So right there you would have an FBI person who's now director of all the FBI. And pretty sure that it was George Bush. And that would be the son of the director for the CIA. Then we had some local cops and military for the molestation of me and George and Janet Bechtold when I was tied to a chair. And they had a bunch of lawyers. They liked having all their lawyers around them, that's for sure. Because having doctors to defame little kids and lawyers and judges to throw cases out and call kids crazy was indispensable to them for what they were doing. And there were definitely, as I say, a lot of women involved. It wasn't just men. I was really surprised by some of the women who got involved. So, another woman that showed up, two other women actually that showed up, they were from the Washington area, were Anne Crane, and she ended up later being part of the effort to take my son away from me, my son Oliver, after he was born. And she was from Washington State. I'm not sure where she was living at the time, but she showed up at George and Janet Bechtold's house, in George and Janet Bechtold's bedroom, when they were making me be molested by women. She was there, and Sue, I don't remember her last name, but she is now director for CASA in Wenatchee. She was also there. And I believe at the side of the bed with Anne. Or at the door, possibly, after some men had gone in to rape me while I was tied to a chair. And then Mary Ann McIntosh showed up at the door, but I don't remember her specifically being around. It was either Anne or Sue, the one from CASA. Mary Ann McIntosh, she was working as a lawyer for the government. One or the other was involved in the female rape against me. The other one just sort of stood by the door and threatened me and smirked after men had raped me and made me do blowjobs. So one of them, I don't remember which one of them did what specifically, but I'm pretty sure Mary Ann McIntosh was the one who stood at the door and smirked, because she was connected to the military as well as to Washington State. So you can see how, I was living in Moses Lake, Washington on a regular basis at the time, but this entire series of gang rapes against me by the government were occurring part of the time in Oregon. So this is definitely an Oregon and Washington and California, like crossing over state lines kind of high crimes against me. And that is just some of what they did to me. And also, they at the Bechtolds, they used socks, and having socks on the floor, having me see like a pair of men's socks on the floor was a sign and a cue to me that, okay, they're going to get ready to. I was expected to do a blow job for them, and if I didn't, I was going to be deprived of food and electrocuted. So, and then possibly beat up by martial arts artists or whoever. So that was another trigger that they had used, was this use of socks. They didn't have to say one single word. They just had these socks on the floor, and then would point to them or indicate something, and then force me to respond. And so that whole series of gang rapes against me, and how many times they did it at the Bechtolds' house, that was just the Bechtolds' house. And later, they had their son, Robin Bechtold, decades later, they had him using the same triggers, having all of this information about me, and knowing that I didn't remember them and who he was and who he was connected to. He used all the same triggers to rape me himself, and to continue this government hate crime against me. And Erica Ballinger and several of these other government kids were involved in helping facilitate his raping me. And their parents had also been involved in sexually molesting me and lying about me.